Hello? Hello, everyone. Could everyone take their seats, please? We're going to start the session. Hello, please could you everyone be seated? We can't start until you sit down, please. Thank you. Thank you. So thanks to everyone for coming. My name is Anne Singleton, and I'm from the University of Bristol. And this is session 5, plenary session 5. God, we need both of those. Sorry. Yeah, thank you. I want to thank the organisers and Tamana especially and Jebelson for all the help and support we've had logistically, but also in the organisation of this important meeting. I'd be very grateful if everyone could focus and stop the conversations at the back of the room. So I'm going to be quite strict in this session because we've lost a lot of time. So please focus. If you're going to have a conversation, please leave the room and go outside for the conversation because I'm going to be quite strict on timing. Okay, thank you. So this session is about the dynamics of data, policy and action and putting the numbers to work. How are we going to make the numbers work for policy, but also for society, including, of course, migrants and child migrants. But in fact, I think one of the lessons that we can learn is how putting the numbers to work can be to the benefit of the whole of society, both socially and economically. And focusing only on one group at a time is important for methodological reasons, but learning the lessons and the visions and the experience that can be brought from working with data on children can have wider application. So I won't speak for too long now. I'd like to introduce the panel, which are a very well put together panel with insights from the academic world, from Dr. Samuel Occhieri, my colleague from Bristol University, from Francisco Prado from the National Institute of Statistics in Chile. I'm very grateful to have the insights from the policy world, from Gabriela Sanchez, who will be joining us online. And please be aware that one of the reasons for our timings to be kept tight is because Gabriela's working in the middle of the night from her home. So we need to be aware and respectful of the needs and demands on other people who are giving their time to help support this work. And then Miss Mana Al-Jok, who's joined us from the Department of Statistics in Jordan, will be the fourth speaker. And so without more ado, I think I'll start us going. And we start, first of all, I should let you know on a housekeeping matter that Francisco's presentation will be in Spanish and Mana Al-Jok's presentation will be in Arabic. So please have your headsets ready if you need the interpretation facilities. Okay, I see some people still collecting their equipment, but I'm going to start the session now with the first presentation from Samuel Occhieri, who's going to talk about tackling the barriers to data-driven policy and action in relation to research and activism. So lessons for policy. Without any further delay, I'll hand over to Sam. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So I will echo Anne's appreciation to Tamana and the organizers. And as Anne said, I'll be speaking about some of the experiences I've had in relation to working with civil society organizations, UN agencies, and others in terms of the link between policy and practice, especially in relation to how data can inform strategic planning and policy making. Because I think across the field, we are all mostly in agreement on the importance of data-driven policies and practices. But we also know from our different areas that sometimes this ambition doesn't always bear out in the real world for a variety of reasons. You know, we know from speaking to people in policy and practice that you've got concerns about data sources types and quality of data, bureaucratic processes. We've heard earlier in this conference about the fact that governments are sometimes unwilling to accept data from certain sources, which they do not consider official, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to kind of draw on experience from research with organizations in the UK, Ghana, and Nigeria, which support children on the move, to speak to some of these issues, to highlight some of the barriers that they encountered in the projects that we worked on, and how we managed to overcome these sorts of barriers in hope that they can offer some hopefully pointers for what others may do in similar situations. Next slide, please. So the studies in question, drawn from Ghana, Nigeria, and the UK, took place between 2019, so just around the COVID period, and 2023, with different civil society organizations, one called Global Media Foundation in Ghana, Second Chance Initiative in Nigeria, and the Eritrean Association in the UK. All of these organizations, as I said, support children on the move. And in all cases, the studies were commissioned because these organizations and their staff recognized that they had deficits in their understanding of the dynamics of children's movement. And this served as a barrier to their planning and to better service delivery generally. Beyond service delivery, they were also interested in using the data from these studies to support their fundraising and other organizational programs as well. Next slide, please. Is there a pointer? Right, okay, that's great, thank you. And as you can see on the screen, sorry, that's not working. Oh, there we go. As you can see on the screen, the studies in question mostly use qualitative methods. The rationale for this was because when we began these projects, in all cases, we found that the partners had reams, quite a lot of quantitative data. They had a lot of it. They had disaggregated data in terms of the ages, the origins, and a whole host of other information around their service users. And I was therefore interested in alternative ways through which we could improve the information that they had. But I was quite surprised that most of them were really concerned about the proposal to use qualitative data. In meetings, they stressed that quantitative data, as we probably are aware of, is easier to benchmark, it's easier to compare over time, and so on and so forth. They also raised the perceived objectivity question, the fact that quantitative data was preferred by them because it was seen to be more reliable by their partners. They said partners also wanted numbers and hard stats rather than qualitative data. Funders also demanded responses from them in quantitative format, among a host of other concerns which they raised. And these were all very valid questions indeed. And so it took a lot of convincing to get them to agree that perhaps it shouldn't be an either or, because they have got so much quant data. It will be valuable to also try to understand the issues from a qualitative viewpoint. And eventually they agreed to do so. The green one, okay, yeah. Now, to convince the partners of the need to use qualitative data or qualitative methods for these three different studies, we had to explore the value of it. So we had to think about the fact that they were interested in needs assessment, trying to think about their service users' needs, and the fact that to be able to do so, to understand the unique needs of the children who were using their service, the methods we proposed earlier would help them to better do that. And as I said, they already have a lot of quant data. So trying to get a holistic picture, we proposed qualitative methods to help them to do that. We also spoke about how participatory workshops, for instance, would allow their service users a better chance of feeding into the services that they provided, because this was also a concern they had raised. Obviously, this is a right of the participants, the service users. Article 12 of the UNCRC says children have a voice, young people have a voice to be included in these conversations. And so participatory workshops were used as a way of eliciting the views of the service users. We also spoke about, the power of personal testimonies, to inform public discourse around the movements of young people. In the UK context, in particular, we were working around issues of quite negative media reports around child migrants and migration in general. And so we had to convince the partners that, being able to articulate the sorts of views, the experiences which their service users had gone through could be one way of countering some of these concerns in the public, which our partners wanted to do indeed. Now, I'm just going to quickly go into the kinds of recommendations that we draw from these studies, mainly because we don't have the time to go into the findings and that sort of thing. But in the end, the use of the specified qualitative methods enabled the study to achieve the goals which the partners had set for the projects. And as I said, I can't go into the details, but I want to center the rest of my talk on these recommendations, because by the end of the studies, most of the organizational leadership and staff who were initially unsupportive of the place of qualitative data in informing their strategic policy making and planning were convinced of its value. So there was still some prejudice, I would say, or at least confusion on the value of qualitative data in advancing their work. But for sure, most of them were convinced of the value of it. And this was in part due to how we packaged the data. We use a whole range of different means of presenting it. So we had vignettes which were used to provide the findings in pictorial form. We also had thematic documents which provided the partners with very easy to present information from the studies. We also had policy briefings and other formats which the partners really valued. But I think, drawing on all of this, one of the things I would really encourage us all to do, and I've been encouraged by the fact that even though most of us here are statisticians, we've touched on the value of qualitative data. It shouldn't be an either or. We know that drawing on both approaches allow us to tell a more kind of complex story about what is a very complex humanitarian and human rights issue. So I say that one of the things that we learn from these three studies is the need for capacity building in qualitative research. We know that most of our organizations have got a lot of emphasis, a lot of training on quantitative methods, statistical data gathering, and so on. But from the experience I've had with working with civil society and other organizations, qualitative research tends to play a very kind of peripheral role in the training that staff are given. There's also communication, or how we communicate qualitative data, and this is linked to the capacity building. As I said, in the course of planning these projects, one of the partners had said that they were not convinced that audiences would be prepared for long speeches from the findings, which is how they imagined the data would be packaged. But we were able to show that there are very many different ways of presenting qualitative data in ways that can be very engaging and not as boring as they thought it was. The other recommendation we make is the need for stakeholders to buy into the value of qualitative approaches, because it was evident from the outset that the hostility which our partners had towards the use of qualitative methods was largely due to the fact that their funders, other service users, sorry, or other stakeholders were not really kind of convinced of its use either. And so I argue that trying to have a community where we all understand the value of qualitative data, data with a big D. So we should think about both quantitative and qualitative and not one or the other. And of course, collaborative working. It may be that our organizations do not have in-house expertise in an era of shrinking funding and so on and so forth. So we can always work together. One of the lessons from this research, to draw on expertise, especially from other civil society organizations or from academia, and would echo this. But I think from our viewpoint as academics, we are also really under a lot of pressure, if you want, to work with civil society to make sure that the research we do has real world value, real world kind of benefit. And so there's always fertile grounds, I would say, in the academic world to collaborate with civil society and policymakers to produce data that would better help us to provide the level of service that we need to provide. I'm going to stop here now because I've almost run out of time, and hopefully answer some questions later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sam. That was an excellent presentation and to time. So without any further ado, I would like to ask everyone to make sure your settings are right for the, not speaking as an English speaking person. It's a bit impertinent of me to say this, but you'll get a lot of benefit if you don't speak Spanish from listening to the interpretation. So please, Francisco, you come ahead. Thank you.
Ahí está. No. Aquí. Hola, buenos días a todos y a todas. La presentación que están viendo la tradujimos al inglés para que sea más fácil para la mayoría de quienes están asistiendo, pero como pueden oír, estoy hablando en español para mayor facilidad en términos personales. Bueno, a nombre propio y del Instituto Nacional de Estadísticas y en particular de su subdepartamento de demografía, agradezco la invitación a este importante e interesante evento, pues gracias a él esto nos permite entregar información sobre niños y niñas en movimiento. Sin datos no podemos visibilizar su realidad y sin visibilizar su realidad no podemos tratar de combatir este importante problema. En función de esto, esta presentación se enfoca en la producción de estadísticas migratorias en Chile, con énfasis en niñez y adolescencia, y en las posibilidades de fortalecimiento de los datos y los principales desafíos y oportunidades observados a partir de esta experiencia de trabajo. La agenda que vamos a revisar hoy consta de los 4 puntos que están viendo en pantalla. Por un lado, el contexto institucional, estadístico, migratorio en Chile y el trabajo con grupos de trabajo, valga la redundancia, internacionales. La metodología utilizada en nuestro principal producto de trabajo en la materia, la estimación de personas extranjeras residentes en Chile en su versión 2022, que es la última publicada. El tercer punto son los resultados específicos de esta estimación con foco en niñez y adolescencia. Y por último, la relación entre los datos y el desarrollo de las políticas públicas, los desafíos y oportunidades que hemos observado. Vamos al primer punto entonces. La mesa interinstitucional de estadísticas migratorias constituye un marco para la colaboración permanente entre las instituciones del Estado de Chile vinculados con la elaboración, procesamiento y análisis sobre datos de migración internacional. Desde 2018, y ante la falta total o parcial de datos estadísticos que reflejaran la realidad migratoria, la mesa se constituye como la principal estructura del Estado en la producción de datos sobre migración internacional, ofreciendo una oferta estadística y entregando insumos para la toma de decisiones de política pública migratoria. Se propone los tres objetivos que están viendo ahí. Por un lado, producir insumos necesarios para asegurar la generación de capacidades estadísticas que midieran el fenómeno migratorio. En segundo lugar, agregar valor a los datos de las instituciones estadísticas de la mesa como a otras instituciones que producían información no necesariamente estadística. Y por último, generar insumos de las diferentes etapas de producción estadística. La Mesa de Estadísticas Migratorias está integrada por un lado por el Instituto Nacional de Estadísticas y por el Servicio Nacional de Migraciones, INE y CERMIG de ahora en adelante, pero adicionalmente por la Policía de Investigaciones, el Ministerio de Relaciones Exteriores y el Servicio de Registro Civil de Identificación, PDI, MINREL y Registro Civil, cada uno de ellos de aquí en adelante. Adicionalmente, se realizan reuniones ampliadas con diferentes organismos del Estado para promover los objetivos de la mesa, siendo la estimación su principal producto de trabajo. Adicionalmente, a este contexto institucional se agrega una activa participación en instancias de colaboración internacionales, regionales e internacionales mayores. Dichos espacios, destinados al fortalecimiento del saber y de la cooperación internacional en la producción de estadísticas migratorias, nos ha permitido compartir experiencias y aprender buenas prácticas. Se destacan entre ellas la red de transmisión del conocimiento y el grupo de trabajo sobre datos de migración internacional de la Comisión Estadística de las Américas, de la CEPAL, y también en el 2023 en particular, nuestra participación en el marco del IDAC de la presentación del Manual de Fortalecimiento de la Capacidad de Datos Específicos sobre Niños en Movimiento, donde se presentó la experiencia de Chile en Atenas, Grecia. También relacionado con esto, hay dos experiencias relevantes de acuerdo al trabajo realizado con UNICEF. Por un lado, la publicación de un estudio sobre estadísticas enfocadas en niñez y adolescencia, tomando en cuenta los datos de la estimación en su versión 2021. Fue la estimación 2021 en 2023 porque aún no se publicaba la estimación del 2022. Bueno, y sus respectivas reestimaciones desde 2018 a 2020. Y adicional a eso, y en conjunto en realidad, la profundización del análisis de migración y adolescencia, retroalimentando el proceso de la estimación en general, utilizando distintos registros de organismos del Estado con un amplio ámbito de vinculación de datos. Vamos a la metodología de la estimación. Un poco de historia. Con el objetivo de mejorar la entrega de datos sobre la cantidad de personas extranjeras en Chile frente al aumento de la población migrante después del censo de 2017, el cual quedó rápidamente desactualizado, surge la estimación de personas extranjeras en Chile de 2018. La metodología que utilizamos en la estimación de 2022, que es la última versión publicada, cuenta con dos componentes de datos, tal cual están viendo ahí. Por un lado, el censal, que da cuenta del stock de personas extranjeras residentes en Chile al 19 de abril del 2017, el día del censo, usando datos agregados de dicha fuente de datos. En este componente en particular, y tal como se menciona ahí, se realizan ajustes por envejecimiento de las personas y por omisión censal a nivel de comunas. Y por otro lado, el componente post-censal corresponde a los registros recopilados después del día del censo 2017. siendo agregados como microdatos usando variables de identificación y donde se presenta la condición migratoria regular o irregular de las personas. Este componente resta casos por salidas regulares del país y por defunciones de personas registradas en el registro civil. Adicionalmente, y como observan en el cuadro inferior a la derecha de la pantalla, para la población de niños, niñas y adolescentes de la estimación se encuentra limitada, pues cuenta con edades agrupadas en quinquenios. Por lo tanto, no es posible contar con edades específicas y se incorporan en este grupo a quienes tienen entre 0 y 19 años. Como pueden observar en el esquema, los datos de la estimación 2022 provienen de 5 organismos del Estado que fueron los que mencioné unas diapositivas más atrás. Pero más allá del origen específico de cada uno de los servicios, vamos a las fuentes específicas. Por un lado, se encuentra el stock de población nacida en el extranjero que está integrado solamente por el componente censal generado por el INE. En segundo lugar, está el componente regular integrado por los registros de permisos de residencia del CERMIG y por el registro de visas consulares del MINREL. En tercer lugar, y si bien la irregularidad migratoria como tal es más compleja, en la estimación 2022 se incluyó para el componente irregular solo a las prórrogas de turismo vencido de personas con sobreestadía en el país, procesadas por el CERMIG, y los partes de informes policiales de denuncias o autodenuncias de personas presentados ante la PDI y procesados por el CERMIG. Finalmente, a nivel de descuentos, como ven abajo en la pantalla, se encuentran aquellos realizados por motivos de salidas del país de manera regular, correspondientes al registro de control de fronteras de la PDI, y en cuanto a los relativos a las muertes, corresponden al registro de defunciones dentro del país del registro civil. Vamos entonces a los resultados del 2022 y en particular con foco en niñez y adolescencia. En 2022 observamos que 210.521 personas, en particular residentes extranjeros, eran menores de 20 años, equivalentes al 13% de la población extranjera residente en el país. Este grupo mostró su mayor valor en 2019 con 218.558 personas. La concentración mayor entre los tramos etarios del grupo completo de menores de 20 años se concentró entre los 10 y 14 años, con el 35% de los residentes extranjeros de dicho grupo de edad, equivalentes a 73.033 personas. Según la estimación 2022, dentro del grupo de menores de 20 años se concentran principalmente 6 colectivos. De ellos, 3 son países fronterizos con Chile y otros 3 países que han tenido en distintos momentos crisis migratorias diversas. Venezuela, Perú, Colombia, Bolivia, Haití y Argentina. Entre ellos, Venezuela es el único colectivo que ha crecido sostenidamente desde 2018 a 2022, representando cada uno de estos años en particular 30,7% y 38,4% del total de niños, niñas y adolescentes migrantes, respectivamente. En 2022, 2.662 de los residentes extranjeros irregulares registrados eran menores de 20 años, representando solamente al 2,5% del total de población irregular en la estimación 2022. Parece ser un porcentaje bastante bajo y probablemente tenga que ver con la cantidad de fuentes de las que disponemos hasta el momento. Esta cifra es relevante porque muestra un grupo vulnerable en su condición migratoria, pero también por su condición etaria. Pero además, porque son niños desprotegidos en algunos aspectos del Estado. Si bien el Estado de Chile provee servicios como la educación y la salud a nivel universal, hay otros como la identificación representada por la entrega del documento de identidad para extranjeros, solo se entrega en los casos en que aquellos realicen solicitudes de permisos de residencia. Finalmente, respecto a la relación entre los datos y las políticas migratorias y las oportunidades y desafíos que hemos observado, todo lo anteriormente mencionado se relaciona con aspectos concretos en que el Estado de Chile ha considerado cumplir, en particular con el principio de interés superior del niño, niña o adolescente, el cual se encuentra contemplado en la ley número 21.325 de Migración y Extranjería. Allí, el CERMIG establece la iniciativa de intermediación en materia de niños, niñas y adolescentes, la cual tiene a su cargo el programa Niñez Migrante. En esta, el objetivo es, y cito directamente, desarrollar estrategias orientadas a promover la regularidad migratoria desde un enfoque de derechos, fortaleciendo la inclusión social de niños, niñas y adolescentes migrantes en la sociedad chilena. Este programa se ejecuta a nivel nacional en coordinación con distintas organizaciones e instituciones del Estado. En la diapositiva pueden ver el enlace al sitio web del CERMIG, donde se presenta el compromiso del Estado con la niñez y adolescencia migrante, mencionado en el decreto número 177 del año 2022 del Ministerio del Interior y Seguridad Pública, el cual señala, entre otras razones humanitarias para otorgar un permiso de residencia en Chile, la situación de niños, niñas y adolescentes como tal. De acuerdo a la experiencia aprendida en la Mesa de Estadísticas Migratorias y en instancias internacionales también, ligadas a la producción de datos migratorios, el desarrollo de sistemas de interoperabilidad y de sistemas estadísticos permiten dar respuesta a la gestión migratoria y a los usuarios de información. De manera complementaria, el vínculo entre el desarrollo de ambos sistemas permite y promueve una mayor oportunidad y fiabilidad de los datos, junto con una generación y desarrollo de mejores políticas públicas gracias a la entrega de datos migratorios de mejor calidad. Y como oportunidad al futuro y presente en realidad, logramos agregar para la estimación 2023 tres componentes o tres fuentes de información al esquema de la estimación 2023. Por un lado, en el componente irregular se agregaron dos fuentes. El empadronamiento biométrico, que es un registro voluntario de personas que ingresaron al país por pasos no habilitados, realizado por el CERMIG, y por otro lado, el registro de matrículas escolares de niños, niñas y adolescentes que cursan educación primaria o secundaria y no cuentan con identificación, que corresponde al Ministerio de Educación. Y por otro lado, entre los descuentos realizados se incluyó las nacionalizaciones de personas extranjeras registradas por el CERMIG, solamente para el caso de los registros administrativos. Y por último, a nivel de oportunidades de cara al futuro, existe la posible inclusión en la estimación de datos de personas que se atienden en el Sistema Nacional de Salud, lo cual no aparece en la diapositiva por si acaso, y de infantes que asisten a educación preescolar, ambos en casos de personas que están en situación irregular en términos migratorios, y adicionalmente la publicación de los resultados del Censo de Población y Vivienda 2024. Muchas gracias.
So thank you very much, Francisco. We're learning more about how the need for being proactive from all sides and intervening and collaborating is important. And sometimes the boundaries between policy research and activism are not as clear cut as we might think. So it's very interesting to hear that proactive perspective. And now we're going to have an online presentation from Gabriela Sanchez. Could the organisers let me know if this is ready? Oh, yeah, there we are. Hello, Gabriela. Hello. Thank you very much. And thank you for being so willing to to join us in the difficult circumstances in this and at this time of night. So we really appreciate your intervention. So now we're going to learn something from an example of civil society and human rights action-based project on the border in Mexico, and Gabriela will tell us all about this, the whole story. Thank you, Gabriela.
Of course, Anne, and thank you so much. I just saw my big face. They're showing up. So good morning. Very early morning here. It's 3:30 a.m. But I am very grateful to all of you for being there, and also to IDAC, and especially once again to Tamana for the invitation. I'm Gabriela Sanchez. I'm a research fellow at Georgetown University at the Collaborative on Global Children's Issues. On Monday, I had the privilege of presenting some of the work that we carry out, or some of the work that I conduct regarding migrant smuggling. And this is the facilitation of border crossings, or of the entry of a person into a country different from their own in exchange of a material benefit. And as Anne announced, I am going to be talking today about this specific example of an organization that I have been supporting since 2016, which is Derechos Humanos Integrales en Acción, or DIA. DIA, if we can move to the next slide. And I'm going to be sharing, the pictures that I'm sharing are actually come from our work in Ciudad Juárez, which is a city on the U.S.-Mexico border. And I'll show you a map in a second to give you a sense of where we are and what we do. DIA, it was founded in 2013, and its goal is to promote and defend the rights of people on the move. And it also comprises, different areas of service. One that is primarily focused on providing humanitarian assistance along the U.S.-Mexico border. Also, the provision of legal and migration-related services to people who have arrived to our community. There's also the provision of mental health and psychosocial services. There is a team of psychologists and other mental health experts that provide emergency mental health services for the people who arrive. We also have a gender-based violence unit, my apologies, and services that are specific to children. And we're going to be talking about that element today. Next slide, please. So this is my border. I love to talk about the border because it's a place that I love. Many times we hear very tragic stories about what is happening along our communities. And this is also a part of the border that has been very much impacted by violence and related to drug trafficking activities. So, but it's also a community that has always responded to the demand for humanitarian services, to the need that is collective, to provide support. So Ciudad Juárez is right there where the star is. It's it's actually a border town, border city, where these two American states, New Mexico and Texas, and the Mexican state of Chihuahua converge. So it's also a complicated border. We can move to the next slide. And this is primarily given some of the challenges, again, that we see in terms of mobility. We are a community of arrival, of origin, and of destination, and like people who are, who come back to, people who arrive to this community on the border seeking to cross into the United States, people who are returned. Many people also come to Juárez to live. It has a very strong manufacturing industry and a very prosperous service industry that has defined, the context of the community. But what is happening in terms right now of the border, in terms of mobility and the arrivals of people, Since 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, the Mexican government implemented a series of controls known as migrant protection protocols that in coordination with the United States. And this implied that people had to wait on the Mexican side of the border to file or to be heard or to get their asylum applications heard, by an American court. This led, for people to remain on the Mexican side of the border. It also led to accumulation of people who were waiting there for their hearings. We also had Title 42 and Title 8. These were elements of legislation, of American legislation, that also required for people to remain on the Mexican side of the border without the ability or the possibility of filing any kind of request for relief. At this point in time, and this is also looking towards the transition, with the new president, the number of apprehensions on the border, and these are the people who come into contact with Border Patrol agents, and these are American Border Patrol agents, has actually been reduced significantly. And this is in part because there's a new mechanism for people to request an appointment to apply for asylum. And this is carried out by an app. And that it's called CBP-1. One of the challenges of using the app is that it's pretty uncertain to know when you're going to receive this appointment. There's people who have just arrived here to the border and who have been here for just a few days, and they immediately receive or in a very short period of time receive the permit or the authorization to present themselves for consideration to apply for asylum. This is not a permission or an authorization that allows them to come in. But in general, if at this point in time somebody comes right here to the bridge, to the international bridge, presents themselves to immigration authorities requesting asylum, they are immediately sent back. There is not a mechanism allowing people to get access to any kind of protection. Next slide, please. I think that, when we hear about Ciudad Juárez and some of the references related to what is happening here, I think most people have heard about the disappearances, the gender-based violence and the level of abuse and intimidation that women face. But for us as a community, it has also been important to talk about other elements of the experience of living in the city. Once again, taking into consideration that we are a city of origin, transit, destination, and return, about a third of the people who live in our city live within the poverty, below the poverty line. And this, most of the people concentrate, look where you see that the letters that say El Paso right there on the map. So this is the area that is immediate. If we can go back to the prior slide, just to show something really quickly. It's immediate to the fence, to the border fence. And this is, the fact that most people live there already creates the stage, for some of the activities that take place along that segment of the city. If we can, move to the next. Thank you. So this picture right here is the fence. It's a segment of the border fence that separates both of our communities, the Mexican from the American side of the border. A few years ago, and I think, to keeping in mind the context that I just shared with you, the fact that people cannot apply for any legal mechanism or for any kind of international, they cannot apply. I'm sorry, it's too early. The fact that people cannot apply for international protection at the bridge translates into many of them still attempting to cross the border irregularly. So the demand for border crossing services is still there. Some people wait. At the present moment, I think that the pressure that is accumulating over the presidential transition is leading many people to just try, for to get in, to get across before we see the changes in both administrations. So most actors, most people who provide border crossing services in our community in the city of Juarez are men, women, and children. And they are people who live, again, within the community. They live in the immediate area of the border fence. And so they know the geography, they know the landscape. And these are the places where children have grown. And over the last, I would say this is a tendency that has always existed, but for the last 10 years, we have seen an increase in the participation of children in the community. And the children are recruited by friends, by family members, but also by groups of people, adults that provide the services, along the border. Technically, even though the children give their consent, given the fact that this is a criminalized activity, it's a crime to facilitate migrant smuggling, both on the United States and on the Mexican side of the border. But the fact that the children are under the age of 18 translates into them not being charged, not being judicialized with if they are found crossing people, escalating the wall, or even going back. So what this creates is it's kind of circuit, the cycle. The children go in because they know that they are not going to face any legal repercussions. And then they go back, they are returned by protection authorities, and then they immediately go back to facilitate more crossings. We are very concerned as civil society about the potential that generates for exploitation and abuse. Again, we know that the children may decide to participate in this kind of high-risk activity because it generates an income, because this allows them to provide for their families. But at the same time, the level of enforcement and control that exists along the border is putting them at risk. And it's also leading many of them to engage into riskier ventures. We have seen an increase in the number of children who participate in migrant kidnappings over the last, perhaps the last 18 months. We can move on to the next slide, please. And I think this is the critical slide that I have to share with you. The numbers that we have, DIA started to collect numbers, started to collect information based on the reports of one of the local shelters that is run by the local protection agency. But there have been no other mechanisms to know what was happening to the children or how they were recruited, how they kept coming or going, as they facilitated border crossings. But by 2020, the number of children who were only in this community, this happens along the entire U.S.-Mexico border, but here I am only talking about the case of Juarez, which is the one that we have solid or relatively stronger data on. By 2020, the number of children that were apprehended by local protection authorities was about 350. And in 2021, as the restrictions related to COVID continued, the number went a little bit down. But then in 2022, as the restrictions continued and there was no indication that they were going to go away, the number, skyrocketed to about 650. The numbers, however, in 2023, when the restrictions that were related to COVID were finally lifted, are unclear. The state of Chihuahua, the protection agency for the city and the state, have smaller numbers than the ones that we have locally as an organization. So, but we are going here only with the official numbers, and they were about 420 children for 2023. However, as you can see from the numbers of 2024, well, it's very likely, and these were numbers until August of this year. So it's very likely that this year the numbers match or surpass the ones for 2022. Next slide, please. It is in this context that DIA, has implemented a program that is known as the Care and Prevention Program for Border Migrant Children and Youth. And as the organization that first identified the dynamic, the hope was to introduce, immediate actions that would benefit the children and that prevented their continued involvement in this circuit migration, and also provided them with other kind of tools, other kind of opportunities that were probably not available to them, within their communities. So the program, has this interdisciplinary and systemic approach, again, that focuses on restoring the children's rights. I was listening to the former panel, and the children come to the organization, come to DIA after they are referred by the local protection agency. So they are detained by American authorities, then they are sent to the protection agency, and then the children and their families are given the opportunity to be referred to DIA for services. This is not a mandatory program. We really enjoyed talking with the children first and deciding if this is, with them, if this is the kind of project that they want to be part of. And then we start to provide in different services that would allow them primarily to return to school. That is what most of them express as their top need, followed by the need for work and also support for their families. So far, and DIA has been implementing this project since 2019. We have worked at 40 different neighborhoods throughout the city. Next slide, please. What are our success stories? I think that this is one part that we all want to see. What are the outcomes? What are the results that we are seeing from this kind of intervention? Policy-wise, we managed as an organization and as working with other people on both sides of the border to draw attention to the dynamics of circuit migration and to place them within the local agenda of protection. Typically, the protection agenda has been very specific in terms of providing services to people in transit and not people who stay in the community. So for us to be able to highlight through this data collection effort that comes from civil society to emphasize the needs that children faced was very was one of the what we consider as an organization a big success. And this has also been replicated in other cities along the US-Mexico border. We also managed to engage the support of law enforcement agencies on both sides of the border. And we do a lot of incidents work, especially with Border Patrol agents on the American side about the experiences of the children on the Mexican side of the border. But I think that for us as an organization, along the lines of this event, that is happening today, having the direct engagement of young people, and when it comes to data collection, analysis, reporting, and dissemination has been critical. All the pictures that we just saw were of some of the teenagers that were part of the team. We enlist them as researchers, we train them on data collection, and as they decide, what the priorities to communicate to local government, should be. In terms of their needs, in terms of what they are experiencing during their border crossing, and what should be, what some of the solutions should be. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, the top need that the children themselves identify is the need for education. So the DIA's project has been incredibly successful at bringing back children to school and allowing them to obtain to get basic education some of them to go into secondary school, and several of them to go into high school, which is, we know that the longer they are able to stay in school, the more likely that they are going to be able to not to go back to the activity where they were involved. And in fact, 7 out of 8 children who joined the program do not return to the facilitation of border crossings. Next slide, please. We also have challenges. Unfortunately, at this point in time, the activities of the project had to be suspended due to the lack of funding. We are in line we're expecting to receive some support starting in March, so that the children that were already on track to through the school or the educational system that DIA had in place, so that they can go back and continue with their activities. There's also, of course, a lot of misunderstandings related to the facilitation of border crossing and the role that the children play. We are very concerned about the increase in the levels of violence that the children are facing, and also, once again, on how they are becoming involved in riskier activities. We see this increase in the number of children as well as an indication of how border control policies are also impacting them and our communities on both sides of the border. We can just go to the last slide, please. I think it is very important to keep in mind, once again, that the experience that of DIA has shown us how critical it is to have the not just the children there so that we can hear their voices, but have them at the table when it comes to the development of and the gathering and collection of all of the data that is ultimately used for the preparation of reports, and again for incidents within at the city level and at the binational level. I don't know if we're going to have much time for questions, but I will be very happy to answer any questions, and if not, you're welcome to reach out bilaterally. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Gabriela. And you look so awake, and thank you very much for a stimulating talk, and I hope you get some rest. But before we allow you to rest, we may be asking some questions. So first of all, straight away, I'd like to turn to Miss Mana Al-Jok, who's going to speak for a short time around the statistical data on migration in Jordan and data sources and challenges. I'm very interested to hear what you have to offer there. Thank you.
السلام عليكم جميعا. يشرفني المشاركة معكم بهذا المؤتمر، كما أشكر المنظمين والمشرفين على منحي هاي الفرصة بالحضور شخصيا للمشاركة في فعاليات الآيداك. أنا أعمل بدائرة الإحصاءات العامة الأردنية وبقسم الإحصاءات السكانية والاجتماعية، وسأقوم بالحديث عن بيانات الهجرة في الأردن، مصادر البيانات والتحديات. طبعا للأسف لم أقم بإعداد شرائح للعرض، وارتأيت أنه أساهم بهاي المداخلة السريعة الخاصة بهذه الجزئية من الجلسة، وأعدكم المرات القادمة أني راح أكون معد برزنتيشن بخاص بهذا الموضوع. نحن بدائرة الإحصاءات العامة تجمع البيانات من خلال المسوح والتعدادات التي تتضمن الأسئلة الخاصة لجميع السكان الخاصة بالهجرة: مكان الإقامة الحالي، مكان الإقامة السابق، مكان إقامة الأم، وقت ميلاد الفرد، أيضا حسب الجنسية ومكان الولادة لغير الأردنيين حسب اسم الدولة. كمان أن هناك مسح الهجرة الدولي تم إجراءه بعام 2014، وتجمع البيانات أيضا من خلال السجلات الإدارية المختلفة. كان هناك تقرير تم إعداده يسمى التقييم للنظام الإيكولوجي لبيانات في الأردن بشأن الهجرة والنازحين. هذا التقرير تم إعداده بالتعاون مع منظمة اليونيسف والمفوضية السامية لشؤون اللاجئين في كوبنهاغن، ومشاركة مجموعة العمل الهجرة المحلية ومنظمة العمل الدولية ومنظمة الهجرة الدولية. كان من أهداف هذا التقييم تحديد مصادر البيانات الحالية وتدفق البيانات وإعداد التقارير واستخدام البيانات وتبادلها، تحديد الثغرات والممارسات الجيدة في نظم وقدرات البيانات الوطنية، تقديم توصيات حول كيفية تعزيز جمع وتحليل واستخدام البيانات عالية الجودة والمفصلة في الوقت المناسب عن السكان المهاجرين والنازحين بما في ذلك الأطفال على المستوى القطري. تعتبر هذا التقييم خارطة الطريق للأمام لجمع البيانات من السجلات الإدارية ودعم البيانات الإحصائية. كان من أهم نتائج هذا التقييم أن النظام البيئي للبيانات والإحصاءات في الأردن كان متقدم نسبي، ويظهر العديد من العلامات المشجعة ممثلة بأن دائرة الإحصاءات العامة أنشئت بموجب قانون لديها نظام ولاية للبيانات في البلاد، ومع ذلك فإن النظام في الأردن لا مركزي، بمعنى أن البيانات يتم جمعها من قبل الوزارات والدوائر الحكومية في سجلات خاصة فيها، وتغطي أيضا مجموعة واسعة من البيانات حول السكان. وتنشر هذه الإحصاءات ضمن إطار قانون الإحصاءات. كما يتم الاحتفاظ ببعض هذه البيانات أو بمعظم هذه البيانات في أشكال رقمية يمكن ربطها. الإطار القانوني في الدولة قوي، ولكنه يحتاج إلى مزيد من الإنفاذ والتحديث في مجالات معينة. البيانات المتعلقة بالمهاجرين زي ما ذكرنا من خلال مصادر بيانات التعدادات والدراسات الإستقصائية والمسح الفصلي للقوى العاملة والسجلات الإدارية والإحصاءات التي تقدمها المنظمات غير الحكومية الدولية مثل مفوضية الأمم المتحدة لشؤون اللاجئين. كما تقوم كل وزارة أو مؤسسة بجمع البيانات لغرضها الخاص، ومع ذلك فإن لا مركزية البيانات إلى جانب عدم وجود هيئة تنسيق مركزية قد تؤدي إلى تجزئة أو عدم اتساق البيانات. سيكون هناك ربط ودمج في أنظمة البيانات المختلفة عبر الوزارات التنفيذية، أمر مفيد لتقوية النظام الإحصائي والعمل في الأردن. هناك قاعدة بيانات تابعة لجهة وزارة الداخلية تتضمن هذه البيانات قاعدة عن غير الأردنيين وخصائصهم المختلفة، لكن بسبب الإجراءات الأمنية فإنه يصعب الحصول على هذه البيانات التي تحتاج إلى تصريح من الدولة. لا شك أن صعوبات رصد تحركات الأطفال فيها صعوبة كبيرة، فنحن بالأردن مثلا لا يوجد هجرة للأطفال بمفردهم أو تحركهم بدون أقاربهم وأسرهم. وفيما يخص بيانات اللاجئين فإن هناك نوعين من اللاجئين، مسجلين وغير مسجلين. أما اللاجئين المسجلين فهم يكون مسجلين لدى المفوضية السامية في عمان وهي مسؤولة عنه بشكل كامل. أما اللاجئين غير المسجلين فيشكلون أكثر من نصف عدد اللاجئين المتواجدين في المملكة، والغالبية الساحقة منهم مقيم في المدن والأرياف. بس كأرقام إحصائية بدي أضيف إنه عدد السكان الأردنيين حسب نتائج تعداد 2015 بلغ حوالي 9 ملايين ونص. نسبة السكان الغير أردنيين 30% تقريبا. كما إنه 3 ملايين الغير أردنيين حوالي 1,300,000 منهم يعتبروا لاجئين، 80 منهم كنسبة هم من اللاجئين السوريين. طبعا هدول اللاجئين الغالبية الساحقة من اللاجئين المتواجدين في المملكة مقيمين في المدن والأرياف خارج المخيمات اللجوء التي تم تحديدها من قبل الدولة، ويصعب الوصول إليهم للحصول على بيانات التفصيلية، ويتم تغطيتهم من خلال المسوح الديموغرافية والتعداد العام للسكان والمساكن الذي ينفذ كل 10 سنوات مرة واحدة. المسجلين غالبيتهم في مخيمات اللاجئين وغير مسجلين منتشرين في كافة المدن والقرى في المملكة. هناك توصية بإجراء مسوح متخصص للاجئين المسجلين الذي من خلاله يمكن الوصول إلى أطفال اللاجئين الذين لا ينتمون إلى أسرهم وبحاجة إلى تمويل من قبل الدولة. طبعا عملية التقييم التي تم إجراءها لم يتم اتخاذ فيها أي سياسات، لكن تم تزويدها لجهة وزارة التخطيط المعنية في الأردن. وشكرا، يعطيكم العافية.
Thank you, shukran. I'm very grateful to the speakers for being so disciplined with the time. So we've got some time now for questions and answers. And Gabriella, I think, is still there online. So I'm going to give up the time that was allocated for me to explain to you what you should be thinking about, and I'm going to ask you to tell us what your questions are, to ask questions and to the panel, and to make observations. And I will prioritise people who haven't yet intervened in this meeting and people who have questions rather than statements. So I'm hoping that we can have a nice flow of interaction and make this a dynamic session. So please indicate if you'd like to ask a question. Please, yes. Is there a microphone? Oh, thank you.
Hello, I will speak in Spanish. Muchas gracias, Francisco y Gabriela, por su intervención. Me pareció muy interesante y también la de los otros presentadores. Muchas gracias. Tengo una pregunta para Francisco y una para Gabriela. Primero, para Francisco, quería saber si consideraron dentro de los números la niñez nacida en Chile, pero de padres extranjeros en condición irregular. Si sí o no y por qué. Y lo pregunto porque me parece que es niñez que tiene vulnerabilidades similares a la de la niñez migrante. Y una pregunta para Gabriela es si los niños que participan en en la facilitación de los cruces migratorios son más que nada niños mexicanos o si son niños migrantes que han decidido quedarse en Juárez para trabajar en eso. Gracias.
Gracias, Andrea, por tu pregunta. Sí, en el caso de Chile, efectivamente no se consideran a los niños, niñas y adolescentes nacidos en territorio nacional porque son considerados chilenos. Son chilenos, tienen todos los derechos y prerrogativas de cualquier chileno, aunque concuerdo contigo en cuanto a que también sufren vulnerabilidades similares a los de cualquier tipo de extranjero no nacido en territorio nacional. Bueno, perdón, en su caso no son extranjeros, pero por el hecho de ser segunda generación, pueden estar viviendo algún tipo de vulnerabilidad que en este caso no está siendo visibilizada por esta condición. Gracias.
Thank you. Is
Yes.
Gabriella available online?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, thank
I don't
you.
know if you can hear me. Yes. Thank you so much. Yes, so, and thank you, Andrea, for your questions, and great to see you. So the children are primarily, I would say in their, like 98% of them are of Mexican origin. Some of them may actually have dual nationality, so they are also citizens of the US. On the American side of the border, this is another tendency that we are witnessing, also the participation of teenagers. On their vast majority, they are men between the ages of 11 and 17. We have not documented the involvement of children from outside of that region, of the border region, either Mexican or American.
Thank you. Francisco wants to come back on that question. Thank you.
Gracias, Ann. Sí, me faltó un punto súper importante y es respecto a qué pasa con los niños que son nacionalizados, que no era directamente la pregunta, pero puede tener relación. En el caso de los niños y niñas que son nacionalizados, salen de la estimación. Y eso también en algunas ocasiones puede resultar un problema porque se deja de visibilizar su realidad migratoria. Si bien adquieren la nacionalidad chilena, pueden seguir viviendo algunos de los tipos de vulneraciones, no necesariamente producto del Estado, sino que producto de discriminaciones. Gracias.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any more questions? Yes, please. I can see a hand there.
Thank you. Is that working? Is it working?
Yeah.
A question for Dr. Chiere, but thank you for all the brilliant presentations. I was wondering, you talked a lot about presenting qualitative data, and I was wondering if you had some advice for us on how to better analyze qualitative data. I know it's always a temptation when we do have qual to just use it to illustrate the quantitative findings, add a couple of good quotes to a report, but do you have any good advice on your preferred approaches for analyzing this data beyond simply using it as an illustration? Thank you.
I wouldn't have a kind of a prescriptive approach to it because there are several. I spoke of thematic analysis, which is what we used in this particular study. Others have used, different approaches, sort of discourse analysis among others. But I think the main thing is that the process must kind of try to be as comprehensive as possible is the main thing I would say in relation to your question, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Another question there at the back. Thank you, Sam.
Thanks so much. Fantastic panel. And Dr. Okira, just building on that previous question, one thing that we at UNICEF Office of Research often struggle with is being approached by colleagues from humanities in academia, who are coming from a very different methodological foundation than social scientists. Do you have any advice on how we might be able to better engage with the humanities, but also what advice we should be giving humanities colleagues about presenting qualitative research and qualitative methodologies that can give us the kind of results we need in practice? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, I'll go back to a point which was made earlier today about, the growing kind of use of technology to assist data gathering and analysis. We know, for instance, that in terms of kind of machine learning and others, context is really important. So when you think about data such as text and images and so on and so forth, all of these have become very valuable resources for improving. I'm reminded of an example this morning when I went running. So I've got an app on my phone which is meant to prevent theft, and it acts by shutting down if it senses that the phone has been taken out of your hand unexpectedly. I was running and it tried to do that because it thought somebody had taken my phone. And if I hadn't seen that, it would have kind of wiped itself off. So being able to provide these kind of valuable humanity-based, whether it's text, whether it's speech, whether it's, alternative forms of data, I think is really important. So just making sure that the kind of the broader objectives of the project are still being achieved through whatever data is gathered is the main thing that I would say there.
Thanks very much for important questions about communication and the way that a holistic approach must involve not only policy and service delivery, but holistic approaches to communication, which is always more than one way. It's 2, 3, 4 different ways. And as human beings, we communicate in many different ways, and the humanities provide very useful tools and useful ways of communicating in a holistic way. Are there any more questions? I'm very aware that we're coming up to the end of time. I'm going to actually call this to an end now. I'm going to give the panel another chance to make any comments now, and then we can finish and you can talk during the lunch hour. And this afternoon, I know some people have to leave early, so we're going to kind of speed up the wrapping up process. Thank you very much for your attention this morning. I first of all want to ask, would you like to say anything more? No? Francisco, thank you. Would you like to say anything?
نعم، هناك أهمية كبيرة. نعم، تعتبر هناك أهمية كبيرة لعملية التواصل المستمر ما بين الإحصاء وما بين الجهات الحكومية، خاصة إنه من خلالها ممكن بمساعدة الجهات الحكومية إنها تضيق الفجوة في البيانات والحصول على البيانات الخاصة مثلا بالهجرة للأطفال. كذلك التواصل مع الجهات التعليم العالي لإجراء العديد من الدراسات الخاصة مثل رسائل الماجستير أو الدكتوراه بالدراسات، لأنه نحن نفتقر إلى دراسات الخاصة بالهجرة خصوصا الخاصة بالأطفال، إنه فئة عمرية صغيرة بالسن، وكذلك كمية البيانات الموجودة راح تكون إنها ضعيفة. فإحنا من هذا المنبر بنوصي إنه يكون في هناك تقوية لتقوية البيانات الإحصائية الخاصة بالأطفال من خلال التعليم ورسائل الماجستير والدكتوراه. شكرا.
Thank you very much. The importance of education and engaging with research in educational establishments is obviously something close to my heart. So I look forward to further conversations and discussions and the ongoing work of the whole conference this afternoon. And I hope everybody enjoys their lunch. Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you.